here's the case. In 2017, government promised to get street children out of the dangers of the street life. Now, the Ministry of Gender and Social Protection set up the operation Get Off the Streets for a Better Life. More than 4 years on, the situation seems to have gotten out of hand, with minors, even from neighboring West African countries, flooding the highways and the principal streets here in Ghana to beg. Our reporter, Justice Bedu, has been engaging some of them in this report.
This is one of Accra's dirty little secrets. It's the dead of the night on a cold street in the capital. This is home to hundreds of people who sleep rough in downtown Accra.
It's almost like a mini refugee camp here. The children who live here and their parents have come from West African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Most of them sleep rough on hard pavements like this. And if you walk right up the street, there are hundreds more who sleep like this till morning, all in this Accra neighborhood of Abose Okai. The people who live here who have been speaking to me say on a daily basis, hundreds of them arrive in buses to Accra.
Poverty is what forced us out of our country. We began begging when we left home. We spent 3 months on our journey with our kids. Our government does not help us. We are only here because of poverty. When we get what we want, we'll go back.
Habibu Ademu is 10. Like many of the children here, his parents brought him from Niger. Their journey, he says, took them 3 months, making several stops until they got to Accra, where they have been begging for alms for a year now.
Some came for food, but others are also looking for more. For me, I wished I could go back to school, but we can't afford it. This is the reason we came to beg. We have been here for weeks now. If my mom had money, she would have educated us. There are some beggars who want to make money from begging, to even build houses, but ours is just to feed and go back to school.
As dawn breaks, the children and their parents flood the streets of Accra, hand in arms. This is the Achimota overhead on the busy N1 highway. They run after every car in sight.
They beat us every day on the streets. They abuse us. They ask us to go and work because we are able. One day, a car ran over my hand and it got broken. This job is tough. We need help.
More than 61,000 persons below the age of 18 are living on the streets of Accra alone, according to a 2021 study by the Center for Social Policy Studies at the University of Ghana. The Beggars and Destitutes Act of 1969 makes begging criminal. And yet, like many other laws in Ghana, there's rarely any enforcement.
The ministry has initiated a program dubbed Operation Get Off the Street Now for a Better Life. Everybody deserves a better life. The objective is to reduce the phenomenon of persons living on the street with such dreams that they cannot be held back. Data collection to create a database is ongoing, with 4,098 children already registered. Shelters have also been identified for us to begin this very month to move our children and persons and families off the streets into homes whilst we organize the reintegration for those who can go back home, those who can go back to school, and those who will be embarking on various training and capacity building activities in terms of income generating activities.
This is then Gender Minister Otiko Afisa Jaba speaking in 2017.
I can actually liken it to a situation of a time bomb that's about to take off.
Elikem Awuye is a child protection activist with the rights campaign group International Needs. She has spent years studying the subject and rescuing some victims of the streets.
Streetism is also like a very lucrative economic venture in Ghana, where you see children begging, selling, and doing all kinds of things on the streets. So that economic aspect that deals with the poverty they are going through does not make them want to leave the streets. So they'll rather stay there and survive than to leave the street.
The Ministry of Gender, which made a promise to end this menace 4 years ago, did not speak to me for the story, saying they were on strike.
It's also part of the reason we have high numbers of adolescent pregnancies, drug abuse, HIV, kidnappings, and all that, which are very, very serious issues. I remember a girl once told me how through the traffic, men give out their numbers. They write their numbers on small pieces of papers. And, they are sitting in luxurious cars and all, so they look rich. So these girls will call, hoping that they'll get something in return. And sometimes the men come sleep with them, infect them, impregnate them, and they are gone. And so they can't even find the fathers of their children.
Back on the streets and right at this traffic light elsewhere around Kokomlimle, another suburb of Accra, the kids are hard at work. With them, minors as young as 2. Road users seem to have had enough too.
Sometimes you feel like giving them something, but the more you give, the more it's like you're encouraging them to do it. I don't like seeing the mothers and the parents sitting there whilst we see these children crossing through the traffic and everything. I don't know. But no, with these motor riders, the motorbikes passing in between the traffic, I don't think it's safe for them to.
With very little in social protection for vulnerable people like these children, more of their likes continue to flood our streets, and it seems there is no end in sight. Justice Baidu, Joy News, Accra.
Well, so let's broaden the conversation. Here on The Pulse, we ask why are foreigners on our streets begging for alms. Joining us via Zoom now is Superintendent Michael Amakot-Atta, who's the head of public affairs of the Ghana Immigration Service. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. I also have Elikem, we're a child protection expert, also who will be sharing his perspective with us here. So let me start off with you, Supul. The concern is that we have over 61,000 persons on our streets begging for alms. What's the Immigration Service's view and what reports are you receiving with regards to an influx of foreigners as well in this mix of the 61,000?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon to you. When it comes to the incidence of non-youth or children on the streets begging, let me say, yes, there are non-citizens of Ghana, so definitely immigration service will come in. But the moment they enter the country and are found along the streets, it becomes an interagency approach. It's not wholly an immigration issue. For some of them, they are running away from crisis within in their countries that there's nothing an immigration officer at the border will do to return such a person back to his or her home country. So definitely we have by the UN Convention that for such people you cannot refuse entry to them, so they have to come in.
Is that to suggest that you're helpless in that regard? You're not able to do anything about the situation? At least immigration control is quite critical in this sense, isn't it?
Yeah, what I'm saying is for category of persons who are running away from dangers in their country, especially those are from the Sahel countries. You come, and even by the UN convention, the principle of non-refoulement, and even when the person enters through an unapproved route, once he's running away from danger, the immigration officer is required to admit the person and hand that such person to the Ghana Refugee Board, and then they will have to take care of such persons. And especially for those on the streets, most of them are running away from danger, and they are within our country. So it is for other state agencies or actors to come in and maybe provide shelter and find ways of keeping them within a certain jurisdiction.
But some of them use the approved frontiers, you agree? And per the ECOWAS protocol, they are not allowed to stay beyond the 14-day threshold if they don't fulfill all of the requirements. So why not enforcing that as well?
If you do a profile of these people on the streets, you realize that they are coming from a category of countries among the member states that are in continuous fight and crisis and all that. And in such situations, you cannot pick a truck, load them in, and send them back into danger. That would be against the UN Convention. But what I'm saying is, there are actors within the country, with the UNHCR and other bodies, who should take care of such people on the streets. It doesn't become wholly an immigration issue, because these are people who are running from danger and have come into the country. So it is on us to provide a kind of shelter for them, because, mind you, for such persons, survival is very important. How do they survive?
Do you have data on the number itself? Because some other reports are pointing to 61,000 on the streets of Accra, or I mean across the country. But I don't know if the Ghana Immigration Service, from your side, you have your official figures and the records on these people, because I'm not sure that the law permits that when you allow them into the country, they flood our streets. I'm not sure if that's the position of the law.
That wouldn't be so, but I'm also not very sure of the source of this data, the 61,000 that...
Yes, but what's yours? If you're not sure about the 61,000, what then is your figure at the Ghana Immigration Service? I'm sure that you have accurate data on such persons moving into our countries.
Yes, but as you speak, I wouldn't have it readily available. But what I said was that I don't know the source of this 61,000, where it is coming from. So I cannot confirm this figure. But then maybe if there's time, I can speak to the appropriate units of the service and get information on these people who are within our jurisdiction.
So what's the level of collaboration between the Ghana Refugee Board and then the Immigration Service? Because you're supposed to be working in tandem, so you are able to find a perfect place for these immigrants.
Yes, like I said, we work with the Ghana Refugee Board. They provide us with training on how to identify and profile persons of such characteristics. I mean, who are running from danger and need to be provided with some kind of safety. So at the border or at the entry point, whether through an approved or unapproved, immediately such a person falls within the category defined by the Ghana Refugee Board. We hand them over to the Refugee Board, and then they process and provide them with the necessary assistance.
I'm sorry if I may have to go back to this point, but it appears you're giving a broad stroke to what's happening. If you look at our busiest frontier, which is the Republic of Togo, the Aplao border, for instance, you're not suggesting to us, for instance, that there's a civil war in neighboring Republic of Togo, not to even talk about Nigeria, where some persons may also be coming from. So what's really the point when you say these persons are moving away from danger?
No, see, that I'm saying that if your team would do a profile of persons on our streets in relation to their states, where they are coming from, you realize that majority, over 90%, will be coming from people along the Sahel areas. And in these areas, we know that there are a lot of extremist activities, there are droughts and other life-threatening issues. So most of the people on the street are coming from such places as these.
But that would not constitute the majority of the numbers, because The data will tell you, and of course you work at the Ghana Immigration Service, the busiest frontier is not necessarily through the northern border. You do agree?
Yes. No, I know that, but for someone running away from danger, at times you will not tend towards an approved point of entry. The first point is where you think you'll be able to run faster and get past the enemy lines. So normally for some of these, they don't come through approved points of entry. They use the bush path, farm areas and all that. Again, I'm saying is, just try and do a profiling of the person on the streets and know their nationalities. Then you understand that it's not, let's say, if I may say, like people from the eastern frontier, maybe Togolese or whatever. No, there are people from these areas. And for these people or for these persons, we need to support them or admit them
now,
by the protocols.
Right. If you look at the report itself, and just as our reporter pointed out, some of these persons are brought into the country against their will. If you take a look at what the international conventions say on trafficking, it's obviously the case that the Ghana Immigration Service would have to either return these people or keep them so their governments could come for them. You're not doing either of these options or stipulations within the convention. So how about these groups of people as well?
Yes, you see, if I'm getting it right, we have people who are being trafficked, who are definitely different from people who are running away from dangers because of war or whatever. But for those who are being trafficked, yes, they fall within our purview. And when we intercept such persons, then we handle them, take them to safe houses, reorient them, and then begin to find their embassies and then hand them over for them to be removed from our countries. That's a different ballgame. That if they are being trafficked against their will and all that, then we do what is needful. We intercept them and take them to some safe houses, then reorient them and try to investigate and get to know those who are behind and all that. Then we engage the embassies for them to be removed. And then, if possible, if we can get to the kingpins behind the smuggling and trafficking, then we deal with them. But for those who are on the street begging and all that, that's a different issue. And that's what I was alluding to in my earlier contribution.
So how are you able to differentiate between those who are refugees and those who are not?
Come again.
How are you able to differentiate those who are refugees and those who are not? Because it appears that you're giving that picture that almost all of them are refugees.
Yes, but you see, when by our training, by our professional training, if some people come to you, okay, let me give a classical example. Let's at the airport. I'm in a booth and we are going to any of the Gulf states, and immediately the person is not a biological parent or relative, but it looks like an agent. So we begin to talk to the young ladies. Who is he? What are you going to do? Are your parents out? Then we get a bit of information about the intentions of the trip. Then immediately we intercept them. Those things are very easy for any immigration officer at the point of entry to identify that these persons are being trafficked.
Finally, which of this would you give predominance to or preference to? The laws of the country or perhaps international conventions? Because as it stands now, our laws frown on begging on the streets. So why are you not enforcing that as well? Well, you may ask for, I mean, for the Ghana Police Service to come in at this point, but the problem begins from your outfit where you're not able to check these persons.
It's not a question of we not being able. There are two categories. If it's about the incidents of people running into Ghana because of life-threatening issues in their countries, and I'm saying that even if such a person enters Ghana through an unapproved route without any documentation, we are required by the national conventions, which we have signed, to admit them and hand them over to appropriate agencies for them to be taken care of. But if persons who are being trafficked or smuggled or persons who are migrants, then we know how to handle them and, if necessary, prosecute their kingpins behind this. It's not a question of not being able to manage the situation, but then there's an instance where there's a requirement of international law to assist such persons who are running away from danger. We just can't push them back. But there are instances where people are being trafficked or smuggled against their will, or even with their consent. It is still wrong against our laws. So that one, we will have to apprehend and deal with them according to law. But for somebody running away from danger, no immigration officer is trained to admit. But when they enter, there are other agencies, both state and international, who should come in and make sure that such persons are well catered for, not to end up on the streets or whatever. So that is the issue.
And I guess in all of this, you're mindful of the implications for our national security.
Yes, I know that. And they are not just in, but then those concerned actors have been talking, are also monitoring and knowing what to do at the right time.
But for now, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you so much, Superintendent Amoako-Attah, for your perspective on this. Elikem is also with us. Elikem, earlier on, I was changing your gender, but that's the nature of our culture. Apologies for that. But let's also take your thoughts on what's happening on our streets. How do we deal with the situation?
Thank you. I'd like to take it from where Superintendent looked at. And I think the concentration for this discussion has been on people who are coming into Ghana and not necessarily also on people who are already in Ghana who are on our street. I think we should look at those two probably at the same time, because we do have foreigners, but we do also have children who are on the streets who are also Ghanaians, and it makes up for a big number on the streets as well. I'd like to talk about when Superintendent talks about running away from danger. And whilst he was talking, I'm like, okay, so you are running away from danger into another dangerous situation. Because if you are running away from danger and you find yourself on the street with all of the vices and child protection or social protection issues that you are exposed to, then you are not free. Again, if we look at the data, over 61,000, unfortunately, one of the areas we are lacking in is detailed data. And then we can talk about the number of Ghanaians who are those who are foreigners, the age groups, and all that. However, the situation remains very serious. 61,000 is a big number for street children. And so I think we really need to do something about it. The consequences of streetism is something that burdens our country. I mean, you talk about education, you talk about health, you talk about national security, and all the social protection issues, including adolescent pregnancy, abuse of drugs, and all that. I mean, the consequences are too dire for us as a country. And again, it does impact our SDGs, right? It has implications for our SDGs as well. And so I think that we need to really look at it.
Well, we may be talking about the Immigration Service, but one of the government agencies responsible is the Gender Ministry as well. What's your expectation from them? At least we know that there's a policy to get children off our streets, but that has not been working for the past 4 years.
I remember a few years ago, one of our partners made a joke that even in front of the Ministry of Gender, you find children begging and selling on the street. That's just by the way. But we do have policies and we have laws in this country that forbid streetism. You can talk about the Children's Act, the UNCRC, and so many policies that are in place. What's happening is the fact that we are not able to implement and enforce these policies to ensure that streetism is reduced or it ends in our country. For the Ministry of Gender, I was going to say initially that the Immigration Service is not the only institution that needs to really work on this with the police. Everybody needs to come on board. Within the local government, we have the Department of Social Welfare, the policies that the Ministry of Gender is pushing to ensure this has to end. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But most importantly is the fact that we do have the laws, we have the policies in place. What we need is enforcement. And we cannot enforce if we do not have resources. For instance, how does social welfare do engagements or sensitize people on streetism if they do not have, for instance, vehicles, or they do not have people out there, or they can't access communities that are, bringing these people onto the street. So they need the resources to be able to enforce these laws and make sure that the people on the streets have a safe place to be, just like Superintendent said. I know UNICEF has been promoting foster parenting, unlike institutionalism, where you take children to orphanages or institutions where they grow up. They are looking more at children growing in healthy and safer homes where there's some bonding. So we need to work on these issues and make them a reality so that if the children are running from danger, they are not running back into danger, but instead they are running into safer places where they can have access to quality education, where they will have access to good health, and that won't have children falling sick and burdening our national health insurance scheme the more, where children will not be abused, sexually harassed, won't be raped, defiled, and where our national security is not threatened.
But you've been doing your independent search as well on this matter, and you point out the fact that even some of these teenagers are being lured by some persons on the streets, especially at night as well. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, as far as I know, talking to some of these girls, especially, this is something that happens a lot. Like I mentioned the first time, Streetism is a lucrative venture, and then it also helps people who are on the street to meet new people and all that. And we do have people in our society that are very evil people. I say they are evil because they exploit and take advantage of vulnerable people who are already trying to make a living for themselves. So what they do is that they exchange contacts, or they'll probably say, let's meet here or park here. And because they know you're in a situation of vulnerability, they offer you more often money, and of course it's good. People want money, so they offer you money, and then they have sexual affairs with you. And I have come across girls who have shared their stories with me, and and some of these girls got pregnant and don't even know who the fathers of their children are. And some of the men will deny it and say, oh, you're a prostitute, so I'm not sure I'm the one. But it's these same people that expose you to these things. And I think that if we don't deal with the issue of streetism, we are going to have more social issues to deal with.
And one more thing before we wrap up on this conversation. The big question as to whether or not you are, of course, as an individual, should be flouting the law, trying to help these young ones on the streets, or not giving them at all. What's the appropriate thing? What would you recommend that we continue to give or not give to these children on the streets?
Personally, I do not buy from children on the street. I do not give money to children on the street. Every time I see them, I engage them. I ask them, are you in school? Where is your parent? Sometimes they'll point to him. 1 or 2 occasions, I've actually walked to the parent. Because I believe that the more you patronize, you buy from them, the more they stay there, because it's a lucrative business. But if you starve them, from, making it lucrative, they'll find other alternatives.
You're basically asking us not to give to children on the streets. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Don't give to children on the street so that they will find better options. Children need to be in school. Children need to enjoy their childhood. Even if they're not in school, they should be playing unpaid. Now we don't see all the unpaid and all that. We are robbing children of their childhood.
I thought you said these were vulnerable people. At least they need our help, right?
Yes, but the fact that they are vulnerable, that's why we have the institutions that are supposed to come on board, all the institutions coming on board to remove these children so that they can be empowered, and then they can live their lives. They can live full, their childhoods can be realized. Their talents and potentials can come out. But if we don't work together and we leave these people on the street and we are giving them money and they are enjoying, some of them are actually on the street because they want their freedom, especially the adolescents. You get to an age where you don't want any restrictions and all that. So they're on the street, they're giving them money, they are buying their drugs, they are partying, they are exploiting more girls. They would stay on the street because they are making money. So personally, I do not buy from children on the street.
And there are unconfirmed reports as well that there are concerns of trafficking, where there's a syndicate pushing those young ones onto the streets. Have you also come across these reports, and what are some of your findings?
Yes, I did. I think there was a documentary a few years ago that I thought would gain a lot of media attention that unfortunately it did not. a documentary where there's a syndicate that brings in children from other countries, and within the country, they have a place they sleep. You wake up in the morning, they give you breakfast, they take you to the street, whatever money you make, you come, they give you a portion of it, and then you go back home. It's like business, it's business for these people that are exploiting children for their own personal gains. And this is just wrong. Just like we would treat any criminal, streetism and exploitation of children is wrong, and we should do something about it. I also like to say that sometimes our laws and some of the treaties we have signed on to are not very, very clear on streetism. We need to make it very, very clear. I see that a lot of the policies talk to it, they are related to it. However, they are not very clear, and we need to make it very clear what the punitive actions are and why we should deal with it.
Alikem, bye for now. Well, the Executive Director for Child Rights International, Bright Appiah, has also taken on government for failing to deal with the rising number of children begging on Ghana streets. He spoke on News Desk earlier today.
We've not even started the fight at all for us to even get to a point to say that we've not been able to deal with the matter. So the state apparatus is finding it difficult to touch it because they don't know the extent to which the damage is and how they'll be able to deal with it even when they find themselves in the middle of the sea. So that is clearly what is happening now. But it being a national security issue is the fact that we have conducted research, and we are in court now to see how best we can deal with this particular matter. We have conducted a research, and it clearly shows that this is an organized activity. It is also something that affects the wealth of children, and the sad part of it is that foreigners are also taking advantage of it to run their affairs on the street because the social security system is a bit weak for that matter. Anybody at all feels that they can carry out their business within our social environment and all that. So one is a weak system which should serve as which should send a signal to national security that anybody at all can participate in that environment for their personal gain. Again, we've also realized that when children grow to a certain level, like 12, 15, thereabouts, you will not find them on the street again. So the question is, where do they go? Who is responsible for them? And all that. These are things that, the state must be interested in to investigate to come to a reasonable conclusion that, if I don't deal with this particular matter, things will happen. And
well, so you're still watching The Pulse here on the Joy News channel. I am Blessed Sogan. We return shortly. We'll bring you some more stories. Please stay.